Alright, in my last video I went over the different types of trap chords. So in this video I want to go over trap chord progressions. How to actually combine those chords to make a progression throughout 4 or 8 bars. So here I have a basic melody going, and let's go ahead and listen to that real quick. Nothing spectacular, nothing crazy, but it will definitely work. And what you'll notice is, even though I'm using different chords through all of this, the melody is going to work every time. The idea behind that is the chords really change the feel of the melody more than the melody is going to change the feel of the chords. So that really tells you how important chords are in all music. The chords are the foundation of everything. That's where your bass lines come from. That's where your melodies and harmonies, everything's going to branch off of your chords. As long as you're playing your melody in the scale, your melodies will always work, no matter what. So really the chords are going to determine the feel of the music in general first. So basically right here I have 10 different chord progressions laid out for you. And each one is using a different technique that I want to introduce to you to incorporate in your music, specifically for trap music. This first chord progression is just the same chords that I showed you in the last video, but they're going through in a very monotonous, very typical way where you see a beginner try to make a trap song. So let's take a listen to that. So that was an 8-bar chord progression, and as you can see here, we're repeating chords. Just like in that last video that I told you, it's not that you want to use every single chord that there is in trap. You just want to pick 2 or 3, maybe 4 different chords that you want to incorporate and build your trap song off of that. You don't have to change the chord every bar. Most trap songs really only use 2 or 3 chords. I showed you 12 different chords in that last video, so when I say 12 different chords is more than enough, trust me, it's more than enough when you're only going to be using 2 or 3 or 4 of those chords in a song. This next example is another 8-bar loop. You can see that all these are just 8-bar loops. Let me go ahead and play it for you. So all we did different was in the second and in the 4th bar of each set of 4 bars. Instead of just having the chord play out through the bar, we separated the chord and added an additional chord. So right here, we basically split the chord in half and had the chord switch up in the second half of the bar. So that's definitely something that you would want to do to add a little more rhythm into your trap chord progressions, and to add a little more variety by having a different set of chords play for that second half of that bar. In this next example, we're incorporating the idea of splitting the bars in half and also taking the second half of the 8-bar loop and extending those chords out to give it a longer play time. And let's just go ahead and listen to what that sounds like. Now you could hear that this rhythm is your typical trap rhythm in trap chords. Just having the chords being broken up within 1 bar and switching up the chords. But what we did different here is we extended the note lengths, making each chord play into the next chord. And that just gives it a more dramatic feel. So that's something to keep in mind. Instead of having what they call staccato, where you're playing and releasing the chord, here we're playing legato, which is playing and holding the chord until the next chord plays. So think about incorporating those variations into your song, or sticking with one variation or the other. This next variation, we're really adding a lot more rhythm. And by doing that, all we're doing is altering the chord lengths. In this one, we have 3 different chord lengths that we're using. So let's take a listen to that. can see that adds so much more variation than just having each chord playing the same amount of time. Again, the 12 different chords that I showed you are plenty. You really, to add variation, you're thinking about how long the chords play when you switch up to the next chord. In this next example, we're altering the rhythm from the first half of the 8-bar loop to the second half of the 8-bar loop. Let's take a listen to what that sounds like. So that really makes the loop sound like it's a full-on loop. With those other examples, you could hear a total separation between the first 4 bars and the second 4 bars, to where you would count this first 4 bars as a loop and you would count the next 4 bars as repeating that loop or just a different loop altogether. But by having the rhythm alternate all throughout the entire loop, it makes this entire thing sound like one big long loop before it loops back around and actually is considered a full loop. So that's something that you want to keep in mind, but you could hear how busy it sounds, and a lot of trap music doesn't quite necessarily get this busy. So it might be something that you want to stay away from until you reach a level where you can make this work, but it is another trick, another tactic that you could have in your handbook. All right, this next variation, what we do here, take the first 4 bars and make a chord progression, and then in the second 4 bars, we just have a completely different chord progression. It's basically the opposite of what we did here, where this one sounds like one long loop and it doesn't loop until we get back here. This will literally sound like 2 different loops, where this is one chord progression and this is one chord progression. But let's go through and listen to what that sounds like. You could tell that this section has a different feel from this section, and that's because we're using different note lengths, we're using different rhythms, and we're using different chords. So when you combine all of those, it really makes it feel like 2 separate sections of the song. That's basically using a technique called call and response. Or another way to say it, it sounds like this section of the song is responding to what this section of the song said. That's a trick that's not just used in trap music, it's used in all music. So that's definitely something you want to keep in mind if you want to vary the first 4 bars to the second set of 4 bars to make an 8-bar loop. And you could do that on a bigger scale. You could have the entire 8 bars looping with just a 2-bar loop over and over and over and over again, and then have the second set of 8 bars looping a chord progression that's entirely different from the first chord progression, so that it'll sound like this set of 8 bars is responding to what you did in this first set of 8 bars. So use this concept not just within an 8-bar loop. You could actually have this go on for 16 bars, or you could have it just happen as short as 4 bars. Okay, in the last video that I showed you, I also showed you how to incorporate harmonic minor. You'll notice in all those chord progressions, we kept this note exactly the same. And that the reason being, if you were to drop this note down to the next note in the scale, it's going to make your chord sound major. And actually, I'll show you right now. It'll make them sound too happy. See how happy that sounded right there? Versus that sounds dark. So when you're sticking to a major scale or even a minor scale, as soon as you drop this down, it's going to make your chords sound happy. So to combat that and to have even more chords, the other additional 6 chords that I showed you, to have more variation, you're going to want to use harmonic minor. And the only difference between harmonic minor and the regular major and minor scales is just one note. Traditional music theory will teach you that it's 2 notes different, but the way that I teach you, you only have to change one note and everything will stay in scale. And that note is simply dropping this note down 1 step, dropping the bottom note of your minor chord down 1 step, and it will be a harmonic minor chord. And you could do that anywhere on the piano roll. It's not going to matter. So here's what it sounds like when you drop this one note down instead of having it come all the way down and making your chord sound happy. you recognize that, it's definitely a technique that Metro Boomin uses all the time. He'll definitely drop the bottom note of that minor chord and drop it into harmonic minor. It's used a lot in trap music compared to the other genres. So if you're really trying to get more variations of chords, adding harmonic minor through your regular minor chord progression is really going to add even more variation, add even more dark tones, and it'll set you apart from a lot of other trap producers, because a lot of, especially new producers, don't know about harmonic minor. They'll get into using all kinds of other scales like the Arabic scale, which doesn't work. There's two notes that won't actually fit into your music, so you'll be clicking in notes that actually don't sound right. It'll sound Arabic. It's something you want to avoid, trust me, because all those videos that you watch, they avoid those two notes. They just use the notes in the regular scale. Any video that's talking to you about Phrygian and Dorian, Lydian, whatever, all of those are still the same notes of the major and minor scale. It's only when you use harmonic minor that you're adding this additional note into your scale and still incorporating all those notes that are in Phrygian, Lydian, Dorian, major, minor. So it's a trick a lot of well-known trap producers use, but you'll see a lot of YouTubers and a lot of people that are trying to make trap music not utilize this note because, one, they're trying to find it in all these other scales that are actually still using the same notes. So the only way to get that sound is by incorporating this additional note. Now here I went ahead and actually added in major chords, the happy sounding chords. And the thing is, sometimes with trap music, when you have trap drums going, when you have your 808s going, that sometimes is enough to keep your song sounding trap. And you can add in major chords as long as you're still incorporating those minor chords that I showed you. So it's not bad to have major chords incorporated in your chord progression if you know when to use them. And this is an example right here. Now, if you can imagine trap drums being on there and adding in an 808, it will be enough to make this into a trap sounding song. And on top of that, we still have that same melody that was working for all these minor chords going, and it still works for adding in major chords. So again, your melody isn't what dictates the sound of your song. It's the chords more than anything. That's really more of an example of how important the chords are than really showing you a trap progression. Here, I'm doing the same thing, but instead of adding in major and minor, I have major, minor, and harmonic minor in here. This just proves that you can add in that harmonic minor note and not worry about, well, what scale am I in? The scale doesn't matter, especially when you get into genres like blues and jazz. They're adding in notes outside of the scale all the time. And that's a future video for sure. But for now, I definitely want you to explore adding in that one harmonic minor note into the scale that you're already using, whether it's Phrygian, Dorian, minor, major, whatever. The harmonic minor note, that one note that makes the scale all of a sudden harmonic minor, can add a special amount of darkness to your song that you would never be able to achieve no matter what those other scales that you're using are in. It's this note right here that's making it harmonic minor. I dropped this note that would be in your minor chord down one note. Major, harmonic minor, minor, harmonic minor, major chord, harmonic minor chord, harmonic minor. So we're using everything in the book there. And this is what it would sound like if we just kept these as minor. We would just move this note up one spot. So again, that's really just showing you that you can incorporate major chords, you can incorporate harmonic minor chords, you can incorporate minor chords, And that's really going to change the whole feel of your song. Now, this last example is a bridge between me showing you trap chords, trap chord progressions, and the next video that I'm going to show you, trap melodies. This chord progression right here is very special. You can see there's a lot more notes, right? Well, this is going to help you with your trap melodies, which I'll show you in the next video. This is really important to show you for just chord progressions in general. I'm not necessarily calling this a trap chord progression. It's a technique that allows you to use a combination of chords to make one chord. All I'm doing here is just playing two chords at the same time. Sometimes I drop out a note. Sometimes I play all three notes of both triads. Triads are your basic major and minor chords, 3 notes. And in future videos, I'll show you how to add in even more notes than just the 6 notes that I'm playing at full here. Let's listen to what this sounds like. And if we wanted to, we can make these harmonic minor. Again, just proving that we can incorporate harmonic minor whenever we want. That just shows you we can incorporate harmonic minor without sacrificing the scale that we're already in. That's what makes harmonic minor really special, a really special scale for the scales that you already know. All the major scales, all the minor scales, it's just adding that one extra note that's all of a sudden going to make your scale harmonic minor for just that part of the song. One thing that I would recommend with the 2 chord technique, you can see here and even here, I'm actually playing the same exact chords. But right here, I'm playing 2 completely different chords. And when you do that, I recommend that the chord that you play on top is further up the scale than the chord that you play on bottom, which you can see here, this is further down the scale. This note right here, the top note of this chord is higher than the top note of this chord. Typically, when you do it the other way around, it will sound cluttered, it'll sound congested. Every once in a while, there are combinations that will sound good, but that's something that I just want you to experiment with because it's not something that I necessarily have memorized in my head when I'm playing. I typically stick to just playing the higher chord on top and the lower chord on bottom. And sometimes when I'm making a beat, I might just experiment around a little bit and see if there is a different chord that I'm feeling at the time that I'm not quite finding or not quite that I haven't laid down yet. So yeah, that's just something that you could experiment with because there's not a lot of combinations that actually do work that way. There's probably like 2 or 3 at most. So, and that's typically how you want to play your chords anyway for most music. Maybe when you're playing older music like gospel or like neo soul, they'll go ahead and they'll play gigantic chords with one hand, but overall, we're talking about modern music like pop, EDM, trap, R&B. Those are going to have more open sounding chords. So definitely keep this technique in mind and you can add these into your chord progressions if you want. Like I said, this isn't necessarily a trap chord progression, but I just wanted to show you this chord progression just to give you ideas if you're trying to do something new. And again, if you're adding trap drums, if you're adding 808s and trap hi-hats and all that, it typically does make your sound more trap. If you want to try to break out of the genre a little bit and not just stick to minor chords, or even not just stick to minor and harmonic minor, this is a way to really get you sounding different from everyone else. If you have this down and you have different rhythms going in your chords, it's going to inspire every single thing that you add to your music. Your music's going to sound a lot more musical. If this video helped you out, please subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.